Alright, another DoNotGod video production. Worth working icon. Yay. Anyway, so I know I'm recording. Hopefully, I actually didn't reboot the system or do any of the stuff I probably should do before attempting video, but whatever, we'll see how it goes. So it's part 2 of the 3-hour video of whatever, some sort of counter argument saying somehow I'm invalidly pointing out that I think life is a cruelly stupid game, horribly inefficient. You might as well just call it meat grinder, and you might as well say it's, it's just too stupid for words. I mean, if anybody invented the game, let's take sentient creatures that can feel and torture them slowly until they're dead, and then, make new ones and just do it over and over and over again. A lot. Yeah, no, it's really dumb. My opinion.
There would be fewer losers.
Okay, so some of the whole parts, right? So we're talking about the fact that there's inevitable correlations between things. We need food. We have to get the food in a certain way because of the way we've been evolved. We basically have to steal it from other organisms that have created energy, or essentially walking around as batteries, and we have to go steal their batteries. Steal the value that is built into them, that they've taken years of, plants been looking at the sun for years maybe to build its fruit, and we steal it, wherever we can. Fruit's not a great example because obviously that's a symbiotic relationship. That's all part of the game being played. Is the fruit trees are basically selling, seeds, and they have to sit there and invest a lot in advertising, creating a seed worth getting. Anyway, which is just sad, tragic, and horrible. Which is the point of the video.
The case, somebody else would win, and there would be the same number of losers.
So he thinks he can break the reality of the risk game. So even if you could, I would argue getting there is going to take so long and be so expensive in terms of all the mistakes and errors that it's not worth it. You still can't explain why it's okay to torture things for this project. That somehow the existence of human beings is worth torturing things for. Man, it's, in my opinion, there's no evidence that it's worth this at all.
So I just wanted to point that out because it is kind of relevant, and it is kind of important to understand that. If you're trying to understand life, that is kind of important to understand. That you, by winning, do not create losers.
Alright, so again, the relationship is built right into the structure. There's absolutely no way the game can be played otherwise. Even under normal breeding conditions, we know that you have to kill some of the people, or the overpopulation would be immediate and insane, and that we know the condition for the females would be horrible because they'd end up having 15 kids and it would ruin them, kill them much earlier and all that kind of stuff. So we know there's a price for all this stuff. We know it's built into the physical mechanism. So this denial that I'm going to suspend the rules of roulette or suspend the rules of poker, the rules of anything else, and say, no, I can have a victory without anybody losing. It's not the game we're playing. It's not the game of life. It's not how DNA and evolution work. And I don't even think there's any way to describe this perfect world you could create where there's no losers. Even if I could synthesize life and remake it, for me to make you feel like you're winning, I have to give you an understanding of losing. For you to know a good feeling, you have to know a bad feeling to compare it to. That's the truth of it.
Even though your winning comes at their expense, just like it does in Vegas, right? The money to pay off the winners comes from the losers. But if you're not a winner, somebody else will be. But not based on the same...
Yeah, and so what's the point? That's not my argument isn't who gets to win. My argument is there's too many losers, too few winners, and that the victories are shallow.
Philosophical arguments. So what I'm going to present is in Mendham's worldview as I understand it. I have to add that caveat because He might not agree if he listens to it.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. Why even go into my worldview as I understand it? Why even attempt that? Why would I waste my time trying to attempt to describe your worldview? The only thing that's important is whether you are saying, I think it's a good idea to build these robots and have them chase each other down and kill each other. I think it's a really brilliant. Or you don't. This isn't that complicated.
Not, you already know about that. You know.
I mean, maybe you can't concede they're robots. Maybe you don't understand that they're just robots. That I can reconfigure them anyway. You know, I can change little tiny things about them, and I'll change their structure and their behavior. Little tiny changes in my life. You could just make my feet size bigger, and my life would have been different. Or some other part bigger, and my life would have been different. It's just a fact. Everything would change because you made it change. Shall I lament that all the different manifestations of me don't exist? That there's a bazillion trillion varieties of me I could make. You know, a little bigger nose, a little smaller nose, a little bliss, you know, change little tiny things. Should I actually sit here and weep that all those varieties of me don't exist? No. There's no tragedy. There'd be no tragedy if I didn't exist. In any context besides the context, of course, that advocates are important in the world. And so just as the world is probably better off because of Martin Luther King than without Martin Luther King, one would hope anyway. I mean, the future, the whole thing has gone so badly, I wouldn't blame it on the fact that people just never got it. You know, this whole judge a man based on his character, you know, and somehow you could argue that certain people didn't take that very seriously in the sense that they said, you can't judge me on my race, and you can't judge me based on character either. That you're somehow just not allowed to judge me. Well, of course you are.
Might not agree, because you might be using language and words that I never ever used in a single video ever.
We'll see. Okay, so here are the foundations of ethicism. As I understand it, these are the foundations of Emendam's worldview. The first is evolution, or more broadly, biological realism. And
so that's something I never said ever, right? I never said biological realism. I never say that kind of jerky jargon. So he says life is selfish and violent. Well, you know, I never use those words either. I mean, in the concept of selfish, yes, that's a problem in the fact that yes, you can't do the understanding Las Vegas thing if you just go based on selfishness, right?
Ignorance. Selfish is ignorance. So there, you know, that would be the if I was to restate it better, I wouldn't call it selfishness the problem. I would call ignorance the problem. Because if you're not ignorant, you know that the whole thing has consequences. That I can't win without somebody else losing. That I can't take something without somebody not having it because I took it. Those are just little facts. So if I have enough intelligence to understand if I'm enjoying something, well, somebody else can't be enjoying it while I'm enjoying it, kind of thing. You know, if I have the woman, then somebody else isn't having her. Just a fact.
Selfish desire to increase your gain and your ability to ignore the fact that you're taking it out of somebody else's pain. So yes, it's very easy to say, yes, I'm going to marry the prettiest woman, and I'm just going to pretend I don't know that there was some other guy who would have made her much happier and was better looking and was lots of stuff, but I'm going to sneak my way in and fuck up the game. And you just don't pay any attention to that part. So you just pay attention to the part that involves you, and you don't pay attention to the parts that involve everybody else.
Right. There's very little we can do in the world that is win-win, is the simple argument. Most things aren't going to be win-win. You're not going to win. I mean, to stop Hitler, there's no win-win. You get killed in the war, or you get your leg blown off, or your face, or some other kind of crap. You go through some horror. There's just no free lunches, essentially. That all of the lunches that have any kind of nutritional value come at a price, and that's the price is too high. It's not a complex argument. The price is too high. You're saying the price isn't too high. I'm asking you, well, how high do I have to make it before you acknowledge it's too high? I mean, how many kids have to be given cancer? What's your number? You know, what percentage of the children born have to get cancer before they're 18 for you to concede, oh, this is too messy? I mean, I could pick all the other ways that somebody can be ruined and harmed, but I'm just saying just one. How many? How many victims are you willing to create for your endorsement of this stupid game? You're voting for it. You're saying, yes, keep making them. I'm saying, no, don't keep making them.
And that's ignorant, frankly. There's no other word for it. But you're just being ignorant. You're just being ignorant. I mean, it's just a fact. You're being ignorant, okay? It requires you to be ignorant, not to understand how bad evolution is.
Right. So that's basically the argument. If you're ignorant, you're selfish. If you're smart, you're not. Now, you can be smart and still not understand that you're an asshole if you're selfish. But the point is you're not smart where you need to be. So again, the word smart doesn't mean too much in any other context than smart on the particular subject you're talking about. So, so intelligent to know that your life has implications on all the other feeling things on Earth. It just does. That you can very likely negatively impact the welfare of many, many other feeling things every time you move. There's a danger you might harm somebody. Not intentionally, but just as a consequence of your interaction in the world. And so to interact selfishly would be moronic in such a context. You have to be aware of the fact that what you're using or doing might be enslaving somebody.
And he's going to sit there and right here, he's going to sit there and say some of this stuff, and you're just saying, how can you miss it?
All right. He doesn't like the term biological realism. And I think it's just because
no, it's because it's silly. Yeah, it's silly. It's just silly bullshit, extra silly language. It's Ken Wheeler-esque nonsense. Why would I bother saying something when I could just say realism? Why would I waste my time qualifying the realism? I'm for realism. I don't care what aspect you're talking about, where you're talking about. Realism is a good thing. Yeah, I'm for it.
Said it, or maybe because it's kind of abstract. He does like the term realism, though. He mentions that later, or realistic. And he loves the term...
Yeah, so I don't like the term realism, frankly. Okay, so I don't use it. But yes, the concept of honest and truthful and accurate, I like that a lot. Accurate, yeah, that's a really good word. Sure, like efficient. Oh yeah, cool. Yes, efficient, accurate, I like those words.
Rational and rationality and logical and stuff like that. But for some reason he doesn't like the term biological realism. That's jerky jargon to him. And he also didn't like my concise description of life as selfish and violent. He seemed also not...
Yeah, I don't even... There's nothing innately violent about it, so that's just stupid. It ends up, obviously, that's how it can end up. If you're stupid, you're violent. Okay, if you're ignorant, you're violent. The cheetah is not trying to be violent. He's being passionate, actually. He's hungry and passionate. He's not even trying to be violent. He just doesn't know that sticking his teeth in something else's neck isn't good for them. He doesn't know. That it means they're going to have a really bad day. He doesn't know he's causing them to have a bad day.
Fully understand it. Now this is kind of weird because he spent several minutes ranting about, the brutality of nature, like birds getting kicked out of nests, nature being a Freddy Krueger movie,
Okay, so he's calling that a rant. So again, where's the ground for us to have any debate or conversation about anything? You don't think that's a significant thing. You think that's just trivial and meaningless. Okay, that in most of the animal species, the attrition rate is insane. I mean, it can go into the millions of dead babies for every survivor. That you're taking little immature organisms and brutalizing them. Just, the worst kind of rape and molestation and murder. And you're saying that's just rhetoric, just garbage. That doesn't mean anything. That's babbling. So where's our ground for any conversation? There's no ground for a conversation. You think the thing I think is most meaningful in the universe, the advent of a sentient organism being tortured, and you don't think it has any meaning. So how could we possibly have a conversation about anything? You're a nihilist, insane kook. I don't have anything to talk to you about.
So he's already spent quite a bit of time talking about the selfishness and violence of life, but he doesn't like to hear it clearly and concisely stated in that way.
Whatever. It's not the way I would describe the problem. So again, you want to put your words on the problem. I'm saying it's not evil. I'm saying it's not a moral question. I'm saying, yes, this isn't an act of violence. It's an act of stupidity. If the cheetah knew better, we could even give him a name like Gary, the cheetah, okay, and that Gary had a few, went to school and learned a few things, and he found out that, oh, they have brains, I have a brain, the brain has sensations and feelings, I'm going to make this animal have a really bad day. I don't want to do that. I don't got any interest in that. Maybe I'll see if I can eat something else.
And I think that's because abstract descriptions like selfish and violent don't contain the value judgments that he wants to deliver, right? His rhetoric contains...
So again, these aren't value judgments, they're value statements. So again, we don't agree on what has value. I'm saying the only thing that has value in the universe, all value is emergent from the value created by sensation. If there's no sensation in the universe, there's no value. It doesn't matter what happens. As soon as you can hurt something, cause it a negative condition, then there's value. So I've made this clear millions of times. So that's our disagreement. There's no more conversation. If we can't agree on that fundamental truth, what other conversation can we possibly have? You have negated the only thing I think has value, and you're saying it doesn't have value. So why would we have a debate about any other emergent circumstance on top of that? There's just nothing, whether it's politics or anything else, because we don't share a common value. We don't share a common purpose. You don't think anything needs to be fixed. I do.
Implicit value judgments. Like if he's calling life a bloodbath or a meat grinder, there's an implicit value judgment in that. Whereas if you just say life is selfish and violent, you're just describing it sort of mechanically, right, and abstractly.
No, it doesn't mean anything. So if the word violent doesn't mean anything to you because it's inconsequential, if violence is inconsequential, if it doesn't hurt something, then what are we talking about? Violence doesn't matter. So again, this is stupid. You violently beat the shit out of a brick. I mean, that's not what we're talking about. So if you think this gazelle is a fucking brick, then we don't have there's nothing to have a conversation about. We have no ground for a logical conversation because our fundamental axioms are converse. We already have a conflict. And if you can't resolve that conflict, you're not going to get black and white right. You're not going to get red and green right. You're not going to get anything right. But your color chart's broken.
Now, let me just be clear what I mean by that. It's something that I say quite often. The men seem to think I was talking about just humans when I said selfish and violent. I'm not sure if he understood what I meant, but the point is that life is intrinsically selfish and violent because life...
No, it's intrinsically stupid. It's ignorant. The only reason why that cheetah is chasing that gazelle is because it doesn't know any better. It doesn't know that murder is a bad thing. That eating somebody else and taking everything they have like that, stealing their stuff, is bad, is wrong. That's it. That's no reason it's happening.
Forms are selected to reproduce, and to do that they have to get resources from the environment, and there are finite resources. So you have excess reproduction, you have life forms reproducing to excess. That creates competition over resources, and the ones that succeed in that competition succeed by being selfish and violent. Right? In some sense, and that applies to all life forms. It applies to birch trees and...
It doesn't. So they don't have to be violent. So again, it's just a silly way of using the word. And again, the fact that they have a welfare stake is the only part that matters. So for trees, it doesn't matter. Trees are bricks. Trees aren't cheetahs or gazelles or mammals with brains. They can't manifest harm. They can't manifest the feelings that make your welfare significant and meaningful. I mean, I can't believe after all these videos I still have to always go back to this Hothloday retarded conversation. If you're asserting that you're not convinced that the other sentient organisms are in fact sentient, just like you are, that they can manifest torturous, tormenting, horrid feelings, then we just don't have any ground for conversation. And I think you're a fucking insane lunatic. I don't know how you miss this fact. I don't know how you think brains are magical and somehow humans are doing magical brain things because they have language and mathematics. That somehow that makes your brain magical. And now your feelings matter, where your feelings don't matter if you don't have those things. It's ludicrous. I know the only thing that's important to what happens to me is that I'm not tortured. I know that's the most important thing. There's not some other thing that's important. Not being tortured is the most important number one thing. I know it's true for all these other animals. Not being tortured is the most important thing, that not being tortured. This isn't complicated.
Bacteria and frogs and jellyfish and humans. Doesn't matter whether they have a brain or not. In some sense, they are selfish and violent.
Well, again, so it actually does matter, and the only way selfish and violent mean anything is because it causes harm. And so if you're going to negate the meaning of the words, that is the clear connotation that selfishness results in the masses getting neglected for the one, okay, so it's opposite the Spock idea, the needs of the many versus the needs of the one. And so that's just grossly inefficient. And that's the simple argument. The simple argument is we're all indistinguishable under the skin in terms of our basic functionality. And it doesn't matter whether you break the leg on that rabbit or you break the leg on that rabbit. It just doesn't matter. It's the broken leg that's the problem.
Okay, so that was the point. I don't think Amendum really got it. He wasn't really... I mean, he's not really interested in hearing what I have to say or understanding it anyway.
Well, what is there to understand? So you're somehow a nihilist, insane lunatic who doesn't understand how brains work and how evolution works. We evolved the ability to feel a long, long time ago, okay? The little squiggly things, trilobites, were probably doing it. Fish, for sure. So I'm just saying that's our clear origin, fish. And that's where it was developed, this ability to be in a bad condition and to have a program that basically just says you can now use your own life experience to find a strategy to stop the pain. All right? So now you've created an organism where you give it a broad mandate, which is stop the pain. And it can come up with lots of different strategies. So instead of having one strategy, one program, it can use its life experience to figure out the solution. And that's a huge advantage evolutionarily, apparently. And those animals were very successful, that were allowed to adapt to very specific lives they lived.
Interested in fighting against me, really, or some idea of who I am. That's what he wants to do. So he had to find something to disagree with, and so then he...
No, I'm not finding something to disagree with. There's clearly an obvious indication that you don't take suffering seriously. You don't think it's the number one most important thing in the universe. And I do. So, yeah, we completely disagree. I don't think anything else has any importance. And suffering is the most important and only important thing in the universe. It's the only thing where value is derived. It's created. Value is created by sentient organisms having conscious experience. That's where its origin is. That's the kernel.
Kind of arguing about selfishness, and that didn't make a lot of sense. He seems to believe that we are selfish because we are ignorant. He was saying something like that. And that's wrong. We're selfish because we're selfish.
So, I know whenever I'm unselfish, it's clearly because my intelligence tells me I can't be an asshole. That's simple. It's my impulse to take, and that's my nature, is selfish. And you have to overcome that nature with understanding that your selfishness is really a kind of masochism. You're only, in hurting others, you're only hurting yourself. It's your twin brother. It's really the same thing. I mean, it doesn't have to look the same. It doesn't even have to act the same. The fact is its brain will experience much the same. And that's all that matters, is that the experience is much the same.
Life is selfish. We're not selfish because we're ignorant. Selfishness is built into our emotions. It's built into our nature. Because our nature...
Says you, I say bullshit. Prove it. Yeah, nonsense. Yes, it's built into our nature, and it's exactly what I stated. Intelligence is the only way to overcome it. It's a huge liability to our function.
Evolved to reproduce. And I don't think Inventum fully understands that. He seems to think that we can maybe escape from that with our intelligence. And
people do it every day. People escape from procreating by wearing condoms every single day. Every day we overcome natural functions using our intelligence. And we do it for good reasons. Every single day. So, I mean, this is just so stupid. Oh, I can't stop doing something you don't need to do. Yeah, of course you can. You have habits, asshole. You don't have anything other than those. You have some bad habits and some delusions. Delusions of self-importance. That's all you have. And it's ignorant.
Also, there's this really bizarre notion that he shares with a lot of people, which is that the violence and selfishness of humanity is just the result of ignorance or superstition.
Oh, Christ. How many times do you have to keep going back to the well? It's clearly the only ignorant things are unaware of the fact that they are harming things of equal value to themselves, that they're not benefiting. Killing their babies isn't any better than killing your own baby. It's illogical and irrational to think there's any fucking difference. The universe sees baby dead, okay, baby tortured, baby blah. The universe doesn't doesn't care about any of that horse shit. So it's just nonsense. Of course, intelligence is the only way you escape being an asshole.
So it's either the result of ignorance or false knowledge, right? And this is really stupid. Humans have been fighting each other in wars, raping each other, killing each other, torturing each other to death.
We know that that's changed radically. The number, the lifespan was short because of that violence in the past. And the fact is that people don't die violent deaths at the hands of other humans in anywhere near the same numbers as in the past. So we obviously have acquired some understanding. So again, you lose. Bad argument.
Each other occasionally, and and doing a lot of things to animals, enslaving them, killing them, whatever. And it's not that they just didn't know that other people have feelings or animals have feelings. It's not like they just didn't know that and like, oh gee, I didn't know that guy had feelings. I wouldn't have impaled him on that stake if I'd known he had feelings. No, they did those things because they were selfish and, in some cases like torture.
Again, so it's just silly. No, they did it for, they know not what they do. To quote a religious fable, it's clear they gave no significance to it. They have no understanding of what's really taking place. They think the them is something other than themselves, just merely in another skin. And it's that simple. And so whatever they're hating about the other thing's behavior or what it did or any of that crap, whatever's generating their despise, is superficial to the fact that but for different birth circumstances go I. You could be that asshole. And you wouldn't think it's a good idea to torture him then if it was you. So why do you think it accomplishes something now? And the only thing that does make you think it works is stupidity. Only stupid people get revenge. Okay, smart people look for something that might be called justice or a silver lining, some sort of productive outcome. And they don't see any purpose in making more people blind, eye for an eye, and all that kind of crap. It makes no logical sense. The simple solution is to prevent harm. And that's why I'm an ethicist, because the simple solution is to prevent it. Shit.
And stuff like that, because they were hateful and cruel. We have the capacity for hatred built into us because it motivates us to compete. It motivates us to destroy competitors, right? So we have this capacity for cruelty, for negative empathy, and to enjoy the suffering.
Negative empathy is a lie. So again, this is not, we're smart, but we have this capacity to be stupid. No, it's exactly the other way around. We start off stupid, and we have the capacity to become smart enough to know we're not winning. I'm not winning if I'm chasing another cheetah, right? So all I do is put a different skin on that animal, and the cheetah's chasing another cheetah. Well, it becomes a little more obvious that that's stupid, right? And then I make the cheetah his brother. Then I make the cheetah his twin brother. I mean, I'm just saying rationally, it's through understanding that you understand if I'm creating losers, I'm losing. I might as well be one of them. I'm not winning. Okay, if I'm sitting in the in the deep south in my plantation, drinking my tea, looking out the window at the slaves, if I'm a smart person, I'm understanding how I'm not winning. That my pleasure is not fixing that.
Others. So yeah, it's not that humans, for all of their history, just didn't know about feelings. That other things had feelings. No, it's that they're selfish and violent, and we haven't changed that. Well, what we have done,
It's just silly. I mean, we have tremendously changed our behavior. Men don't commonly beat women and do this and do that. We all are suppressing our emotional temperament. We're all control our behavior. We all learn as children, that you can't just have a temper tantrum and you can't just do what you feel like and all this kind of crap. So every intelligent adult is constantly monitoring their emotional state and understanding it and recognizing that much of it they can just dispense with through understanding. They merely understand the circumstance and say, okay, I'm upset. My feelings have been hurt. It wasn't intentional. Don't overreact. We do it all the time. So this whole thing is just bullshit. And again, what is he doing this for? Why is he pretending that our native state is intelligent and that somehow, we can't in any way contextualize our existence and understand it and therefore completely change that native state? It's idiotic.
Is get a lot of energy out of the ground, and also kind of shut down reproduction with birth control. So we have kind of we're in a weird situation right now, but you can still see human nature for what it is if you take off the blinders, the ideological.
So where do we need to take off the blinders to see stupidity in the world? He thinks wars are smart. They happen for smart reasons. He thinks the violence in the world that still exists it only happens because it's the intellectuals who are doing it. I mean, come on, get real. The smarter people are, the more sophisticated, the more mature their understanding, the less violent they are. Just a fact. You're silly.
Blinders and just look at it, and yeah, humans are selfish and violent. Now, there's a lot of pretense. There's a lot of pretense of altruism, like a veneer of fake altruism that covers up.
Okay, so some more nonsense about how it's fake. It's not fake. It's a real scenario. And as I argue, yeah, but it still has to happen in the context of our ego. And the fact is we still have to make it understood to ourselves, through some argumentation that it is in my interest to be a hero, or it's in my interest to show courage, or it's my interest to do these things. And that's why I'll do them. So I'll make it personal. But the fact that we can understand intellectually good deed and we can understand productive. Again, I will sign the piece of paper if I had to. All right, the piece of paper that says, okay, if we torture you forever, we won't give kids cancer and we'll eliminate a whole bunch of pain and suffering, whatever the thing is. I would sign the piece of paper saying, okay, go ahead and do it because I know it's the right thing to do. I don't emotionally like it. I would cry. I'd be upset. Shit, I don't want this to happen to me. But I know it's the right thing. And I know I defend doing the right thing. And I know I would sign the piece of paper. Because I know it's the right thing. I wouldn't like it. I wouldn't feel good about it. I wouldn't celebrate, oh, I did the right thing. I prevented suffering by enduring a whole bunch. No, I wouldn't like it at all, but I'd do it.
There's true motivations. There's selfish motivations. And there's a lot of bullshit. There's a lot of lying and stuff, a lot of, individual and collaborative deceptions that cover up the reality of human nature. But, so he's sort of accusing me of doing that in some sense. He's accusing me, on the one hand, of being ignorant and on the other hand, of being deceptive. And
No, you're both. You're an asshole. You're a jerk. You're a dupe and a fool defending nonsense. And I don't even exactly understand why you've made something so simple complicated. Dumb animal, dumb behavior. Smart animal, better behavior. Fact.
neither of those things is true. I fully acknowledge the brutality of nature and the competitive aspect of life, that life is intrinsically competitive. It's one of the things I say a lot, that life is selfish and violent and humans are selfish and all that.
And what's the point of saying it again in your context? Because the truth is that, just think of all the technology that's available that where people could do all kinds of mass murdering and all kinds of mayhem and harm, and they don't. It's only an aberrant, tiny percentage of the number of people. When you think about how many people there are in America and how few go out and shoot up the bar. And you don't think that has something to do with intelligence, that intelligence has made all the difference, then you're full of you're so full of shit. It's amazing.
I don't pretend to be altruistic. I am unapologetically selfish. I reject altruism. So I'm not pretending to be altruistic.
Yeah, so you reject efficiency. You reject logic is what you're saying to me. You're saying you can't see the logic in there's going to be a decision whether you have cake or whether 3 people have cake, and feel good. There's a simple equation, and you're saying you're too stupid to see the equation. I don't know what to say to you then. You're just too stupid. There's a simple here. The equation is you get a broken leg or 4 people get a broken leg. I could make it 40, right? I could make it 400. And you're telling me you're too stupid to say, okay, give me the broken leg. I understand. Saving 400 people from having a broken leg is a great thing. If I can do that, sure. Sign me up. You're saying there's no scenario. I could make it 4 million. I could make it 4 billion. I could make it 4 trillion. And you're saying you still can't concede that you would altruistically concede to the circumstance and say, sign me up. Yeah, I get it. I'm a selfish asshole, but I'm not that big of an asshole. See, so just how big of an asshole are you? How dumb are you to sit there and deny a basic logical function where you can't see the value because you can't understand that other sentient brains being in a better condition is a good thing? Just as good as you being in a good condition. You really think your condition is more important. You logically, intellectually, what's the word for that? In abstract language, in conceptual terms, you actually think it makes sense for you to think your comfort is more important than. You actually think so. You don't have any good reason to think so.
And I'm not ignorant of the competitive nature of life. And Amanda would know that if he had listened to the video before responding to it. But I don't think even if he listened to it, he wouldn't process it because he would just be looking for something to attack.
No, I'd look for the ground where there's no conversation to be had. We've already been there and done it. We've already crashed into it a couple of times in this conversation. We don't have any common definitions of axioms, of foundational understanding. There's just no way to combine the two theories, like quantum mechanics and relativity. There's no point in having a conversation between the two. You can't meld the two because they're based on different fundamental axioms. They won't mix. There won't be anything you can make out of this until you resolve that conflict. We can't have opposite definitions of up and down, and that's what we have now, opposite definitions. What I think is the most valuable thing in the universe, you think has no value. We're done.
That's why he's going to end up spending a lot of time arguing against the voices in his head instead of what I'm saying.
All right, well, number 2, he brings up the asymmetry, which is, that's a Benatar argument. I called it zero sum, okay, because there's nowhere to gain. There's no true goods. There's only fixing the negative tsunami wave thing that's coming for you. So you can hold off death, you can hold...
All the goods are made out of preventing bads. That would be the simple argument. That you can take anything somebody says is good and you can understand it to be, well, because it saved you from quicksand. That's it. It floated you out of quicksand. It was a get out of quicksand free card. And that's all it's ever going to be.
Losing in different respects. You can buy a toupee, you can do lots of things to pretend your way through existence. But yes, that's all you're doing. You're defending yourself against the fact that it's all swords on the ceiling. They're all swords hanging up there. There's no fucking golden unicorn of accomplishment sitting up there. They're all just swords that you can dance around and pretend, yeah, I'm the winner because the sword went through that guy's head instead of mine. That's all you're doing. That's the best game you can play.
Right. So it's clearly been illustrated. Now we'll see what his argument is. That somehow he's going to say that is winning. That a sword through a head is winning. Because it wasn't mine. It's an insanely insipid, I won't even say childish understanding of reality. It's so insipid. It's beneath retarded.
Is to just make something else do the losing. And you're going to die in the end anyway, and here you are. The asymmetry is you shouldn't have an opinion, a positive opinion about something when you never ate it. And you've never eaten death, fuckhead. So don't tell me it tastes good. You don't know. Don't tell me it's well worth it. Oh, the magic dying cupcake is so good. Fuck you. You didn't do it. You haven't eaten it. Prove it. This is so easy to counter-argue. It doesn't even, you take it trivially because you're saying these are such stupid arguments.
What is he talking about? What are you...
Oh, wow. So he can't even understand the sword of Damocles analogy and the fact that you're not winning by having the sword go through a brain just as sentient as your own. He doesn't understand.
So stupid. He seems to be kind of hallucinating. I haven't made any arguments. At this point in my video, I'm just describing...
Oh, great. So that's the other part then. If you're not really in the mood to make arguments, then I really don't want to have anything to do with you, okay? Because I just care about arguments. I care about the arguments you're going to make at the trial about the evidence. If you want to talk about some other crap related to some other crap, that's your business. I'm not in need of any kind of interactions. I don't need to listen to your stupid voice for the sake of it, So unless you're really making arguments relevant to the case, why do I have to listen to you?
Aphorism. I'm talking about this asymmetry concept, that there's more pain than pleasure in life. And I don't know what he thinks. I don't know what arguments he thinks are so stupid.
So again, it's not that there's more. It's that you can't justify imposing it. So it goes beyond just the asymmetry. There's also the asymmetry of the imposition. Accepting a risk for yourself is different than imposing a risk. Those are two different things. But again, I already said it. Look, the Benatar asymmetry argument is Benatar's argument. You can argue with Benatar about it. I'll make some of the same arguments about the fact that the Martians aren't complaining. They're not imprisoned somewhere. And the very fact that you can't harm them, they're immune to harm, makes any notion that you've deprived them ludicrous. There's no deprivation. There is no negative state. You can't improve their condition. They're doing just fine.
And easily defeated. He's just imagining some opponent with some stupid arguments. Okay, now he doesn't like the word asymmetry. He seems to think Benatar owns the word, and so nobody else could use it. Now, maybe that would be understandable if I had just used it.
No, it's not my argument. I told you my argument's the zero-sum game, okay? That the whole game is made out of negatives. So all you can do is erase all the negative numbers and say, there, I got back to zero. But that's all you can do. You can just prevent the negatives. You cannot do anything truly positive. Now, yes, in the limited context of our existence, we can do positive because there's a bunch of other blood to clean up. There's other messes to clean up. We don't have the mess of our own conscious state. We have all the other conscious states that we can interfere with and improve their condition. So we can, in fact, be productive in the fact that we clean up other messes besides our own mess. But the point is the nature of the machine itself, the existence of humanity, can never produce anything good. It can only mitigate against bad. It can only make it less of a mess. It can never make it something unmessy.
Without defining it, but I defined it. I'm talking about the view that there is more pain than pleasure in life.
Again, that's not Benatar's opinion, and it's not mine. So again, you lose again. The asymmetry is about the fact that you can't hurt something that doesn't exist, and it's just a fact. And there's no good you can make, okay, unless you're eliminating a problem. And there is no problem. That's the asymmetry. Goods are made out of bads. Bads aren't made out of good. The absence of good isn't a bad. Okay, but the elimination or prevention of a bad is a good. That's the asymmetry. The asymmetry is there's only whip and taking away whip. There are no carrots. Good is poorly defined because all it is not bad. That's the asymmetry. If you want to just make it a literal verbiage argument, the asymmetry is in the very design of the words. Good should have never existed. It should have just been not bad.
Seems to agree with, although he will not clearly state it. So anyway, he didn't like the word asymmetry, and then he said he prefers the term zero sum. But then he went on to talk about how everything is negative. There are no true goods. It's all swords hanging from the ceiling. Blah, blah, blah. Well, that's not zero sum. That's
blah, blah, blah. Yes, it is. Okay? But having the swords miss you is zero sum. You get through the whole thing and no sword hits you. You have a big zero. You don't have good. You just have not sword.
Net negative. So it's asymmetric, right? There's more pain than pleasure, more bad than good.
So again, obviously that's not Benatar's argument, not my argument. And then in the context, again, of the imposition, again, this isn't about some personal opinion. It's about your ability to impose your standards on somebody else, to tell them what it's worth, which is even more offensive. Being stupid is your choice. Imposing stupidity isn't your right.
Asymmetry. That's not zero sum.
All right, then hedonism. I mean, again, a word I've despised in my videos. Pointed out how this is just not a right word to use for anything I've ever said in my existence. Hedonism is chasing glory. That's the real definition of it. It's just bullshit to say hedonism has something to do with acknowledging risk and suffering. No fucking way. You're just changing the definition of a word and using it to slander me, you fucking little piece of turd. So yeah, fuck you for that.
I'm just going to read the definition of hedonism from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The word hedonism comes from the ancient Greek for pleasure. Psychological...
So we're done! What the fuck? So again, this isn't about avoiding pain or risk. So hedonism has nothing to do with preventing harm. It has to do with seeking adventure, seeking gain, seeking satisfaction of desire. It has nothing to do with somebody who seeks to protect the world.
Or motivational hedonism claims that only pleasure or pain motivates us. Ethical or evaluative hedonism claims that only pleasure has worth or value.
I mean, there, it said it right in your face, and here you are playing the game. Only pleasure has value, and I state exactly the opposite. Only pain has value. Pleasure is just the consequence of absence of pain. If I take away all your pain, all your tension, all your blah, 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 you will be in euphoria. Fact.
And only pain or displeasure has disvalue, or the opposite of worth. Okay, so that's the definition from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Does that apply to Mendham's views? Yes. Mendham is an ethical or evaluative hedonist.
Okay, so you want to play a silly game with a silly definition, okay, a contradictory definition, by the way, right? Overt contradictions in the statement. It has to do with, and then it has to do with. It's obviously got a duality in it, which doesn't make any sense. So why play this game? I've made it clear I don't like the word morality, and I don't like the word hedonism. Now, you want to keep using them to me and say I must accept your rhetoric. Go ahead and do that, but I'm done, okay? Because those definitions are not accurate, and those definitions have nothing to do with the simple argument I'm making. I'm making a simple argument. The only thing that has value is the harm. And taking away the harm has the incidental consequence of creating an absence of harm, which is good.
Now, I think my definition is better, I define it as the view that pain is intrinsically bad and pleasure is intrinsically good. And the reason I add the word
And I would say that pleasure is not intrinsically, because it doesn't happen intrinsically. Pleasure only happens when you've taken away all of the problems. So when you've solved all of the problems is when you have pleasure. You don't have it in pain. So that's just bullshit.
intrinsically, in that definition, is to distinguish things that have intrinsic value from things that have instrumental value. So a cupcake.
Yeah, this is the obvious part, right? We could maybe, I don't know, maybe from what you just said, we could agree that the only things that have real value, okay, are the sensations, and they are either hot or cold. They're either good or bad, let's just say, for the sake of argument. I'm saying they're only one thing, but go ahead. Let's say pleasure is good, pain is bad. And now the argument is, how much do you pay? How much pain do you cause in the world for what pleasure do you get out of the world? And I would say that the simple argument is that that's grossly inefficient. You don't need an asymmetry argument to say we're paying too much.
Might have value, but it is not intrinsically valuable. It is valuable because it causes pleasure or can cause pleasure. But the hedonist believes that pain and pleasure...
Yeah, but the hedonist doesn't evaluate pain and pleasure as something happening in the universe or on planet Earth or in its own town or among its neighborhood. He doesn't recognize the existence of all the other robots making the same exact sensation. So the fact that he's denying the existence of all the other things creating the sensation makes him moot and irrelevant as part of the conversation. So it's impossible to exist as a hedonist unless you are a social hedonist. Now, so if you want to call me a social hedonist, that's okay maybe. Call me an environmental hedonist. Call me a biological hedonist. I am concerned, or a neurological hedonist. I am concerned with the welfare state of brains capable of manifesting sensation. That's my one value. The welfare state of brains capable of manifesting sensation. Of feeling an ouch. If it can feel an ouch, I'm hedonistically concerned.
Are valued, or they are intrinsically valuable. Again, Emendum fits my definition just as well as he fits the Stanford Encyclopedia's definition. So I am not using the word incorrectly. Either Emendum doesn't know what it means, or he doesn't like the word because he thinks it has negative connotations. But I think it's also...
No, I think it's inaccurate. Okay, so plainly, I've made the argument. You don't want to accept the argument. It's a convoluted definition. It's overtly contradictory, and so why are you using it?
He just doesn't like having his beliefs labeled and stated explicitly, because to him they're framing assumptions. Hedonism and altruism, to Emendum, are framing assumptions. So he doesn't have the ability to question them, and he doesn't think they are assumptions. He just takes them as self-evident.
Whatever. They're not self-evident. They have real definitions. And I've pointed out how altruism in any true sense, that is something done outside the mechanism of your own self-interest, is impossible as human beings. We're not capable of altruism. Because we, as individuals, have to live with the consequences of our acts. So there's no way it can be altruistic, because it's never outside the bias of the fact that we're biological organisms. So it's always part of the calculation, The fact is, though, we can be smart enough to know it doesn't matter what my personal interest is, and I can understand that. And so when it comes time to sign the contract, I'll sign the contract. Not because I feel like it's right, but because I know it's right.
And so when I explicitly state them, that sort of implies that they're not self-evident. Right? And I call them assumptions, so then I'm saying they could be questioned, they could be rejected, they're not necessary. I'm not compelled by logic or rationality to accept them. And that's what triggers him, that's what pisses him off. That's what causes him cognitive dissonance.
Look, it's the difference between calling, guess I can pause. Alright, that should have been done with. Nothing. But anyway, Look, fighting over this vocabulary, certainly I'm going to be triggered because it's like saying that, it's like the difference of calling somebody a racist because they don't like culture. So if I say I don't like black culture, doesn't mean I'm a racist. Okay, so it's a clear difference. So if somebody calls me a racist merely because I say I don't like black culture, that's horseshit. I have no obligation to like culture. I have no obligation to like rap music or respect it or appreciate it or do any of that shit. I don't have any obligations to do any of that crap. What I have an obligation to do is recognize that the color of somebody's skin doesn't have anything to do with the content of their character. And those are two completely different things. So again, if you're going to use the word hedonism, which is in all of the classical literature used to describe people obsessed with their self-interest, it's never used, ever, in all of the literature that's ever been written. You're not going to find any references where hedonism was used to describe people who were social engineers, people who were concerned with the state of the social condition. So that'll never happen. It's always associated with some individual consequence. And obviously I'm arguing completely against any notion that this is a single-player game, that there's anything about this game that has anything to do with single player. It really doesn't. All the important facts are anti-single player and recognizing the fact that all of these things have welfare interests and all of them are important. So right there, you're debunked.
All right, let's go on.
Pleasure is intrinsically good. Never have I said that. So again, you lose again. Yes, it's intrinsically unbad. That's what it is, asshole. Okay? Not having a sword coming through you is good, right? It's intrinsically good that you don't have polio. Yes, of course. But it's not good because it's a good. It's good because it's a not bad. It's an unbad. It undoes a bad. It prevents a bad. That's a good. So, these are important word distinctions. Yes, pain is intrinsically bad. Yes, the first ouch. The ouch came first, unfortunately for us. Okay, there was no good. It came first. No, there was the threat of the whip, and we just walk around saying, hey, I didn't get whipped today, and we feel pretty damn good about it. Okay, and nothing else is intrinsically valuable, right? So all you have is bad and unbad. So you're really in trouble, really. You can't make anything good out of that.
So it's not intrinsically good, it's intrinsically unbad. Yeah, that's such an important distinction. I mean, this is just...
All right, okay, it really is. I mean, the distinction I made it into was carrots and whips, and I've pointed out how you don't need any carrots. The game can completely be made out of just whip and taking away the whip. You can get the slave to love you, to kiss your feet, if you stop whipping him. You can get him to do almost anything. And I can certainly make somebody deliriously happy if I take away their cancer tomorrow. So, I mean, it's just silly not to understand conceptually how it's perfectly viable to make this argument that the goods are just elimination of bads, preventions of them. Fact.
This is just bullshit. Emendum seems to believe that pleasure is negative pain or something like that. If pain is bad and pleasure is negative pain, then pleasure is good. Okay, calling it unbad is just a silly quibble over terms.
No, well, calling not whipping somebody a carrot would be lying. So you just want to lie. You want to pretend that something that isn't what you say it is, and a real good. And I'm just saying, no, it's the absence of hunger. That's all it is. You're just taking away the whip of hunger. You're just taking away the negative. That's the only way you gain the gratification, is to take away the negative, the threat of the negative. Everything people enjoy doing has the prospect of taking away their loneliness or their poverty or some other thing, playing the lottery, for example. They're feeding on hope of escaping, not hope of getting somewhere, hope of getting out of something.
And even if Mendham were to argue that he views pleasure as instrumentally good because it's alleviating pain, even if he thinks about it that way, which I don't think makes sense, he would still be a hedonist.
I don't think of it that way. And again, I'll argue that I'm still not a hedonist because the word hedonism has never been used in the context of somebody who's worried about social conditions. So again, you're denying the fundamental argument I'm making, which is all the humans are equally valuable, their sentient welfare is equally important, And you shouldn't ever torture one of them if you don't need to. So if you don't need to prevent crime, let's say, then you wouldn't punish the guilty. But unfortunately, we need to punish crime to deter it. And so without deterrence, if deterrence didn't work, I would argue let all the prisoners out of jail. So if deterrence didn't work, well, if, let's say, isolating them from society didn't prevent any crime either, I'd say there's no point in putting them in prison. But I think there's obviously is a point in segregating them from society, because that prevents crime in itself, and it also prevents crime to punish crime. It makes people think about it and say, I'm not going to do that.
It's just that he would situate value, all value in pain, instead of in pleasure and pain. Now, I think that's absurd. I don't think that is where he situates it, or can, because if you view pleasure as negative pain...
Well, you can say it's absurd, but you won't give me any logical evidence of its absurdity. You won't describe to me some pleasure that is derived without a context of understanding of negative. So until you show me something that can be pleasured without it having any miseries or tension or aggravation or any negative sensations or any negative memories, till you can show me that brain being pleasured, I say it's only a theory of yours. Okay, it's just a silly nonsense you've made up. Because I say you can't do it. You'll never do it. You'll never make water good to a non-thirsty thing.
Or as an unbad, then yeah, you're viewing it as a good, so it really doesn't make much difference. But whatever, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant to the greater point, which is that he situates value in these feelings, in subjective experience. And that's the point of...
So again, he says subjective experience. So this is another way of somehow making it, somehow experience isn't experience. It's subjective experience. So feeling is not something that's happening as a fact in the universe. No, feeling is some subjective opinion in your little brain. Well, no, it's an event. It happens. Neurons fire a certain pattern in the brain, and that pattern, if I put it in space all by itself somewhere, it will experience torture. This idiot thinks that that event is subjective, that it only matters to the thing being tortured in the vial there, and somehow it's not a real event in the universe, that it didn't really happen, it wasn't really bad. So I could make 1 trillion of them, and it just somehow doesn't matter, because it's not a bad thing to have suffering in a jar. I mean, of course it is. No idiot would make more jars of suffering, because they know it's a real thing, and it's really bad. Period. Nobody with any kind of basic logical sense. Again, the only way you can do this is to pretend you're conscious and everybody isn't. Everybody else isn't. That's the only way this works for him. You have to pretend that because it's a they, that it's nothing. And the only thing that matters is me and my subjective reality. And that's the only reality there is. And it's not. We know the universe is bigger than one brain.
The hedonism assumption.
All right, intrinsically good. And then altruism. Again, I've certainly said the word, but this doesn't have anything to do with any notion of altruism. It just has to do with a simple equation. Are you going to be a good robot or a shitty robot? Period. Because you're just a fucking robot. And the argument is the function of your existence through life, your little blood footprint, is your blood footprint going to be acceptable or unacceptable? How much of it did you spill for whatever defenses and protections you earned through it? How much did you exploit and fuck things over? So again, he has perverted things to his own purpose here. I would say, there's nothing else to call that but very dishonest, to play with words that I avoided like the plague, altruism and hedonism. I always pointed out that there's probably no way to be truly altruistic, because you always have to find the emotional advantage to be able to motivate yourself. So why play with the fucking word? There is, as a practical fact, an effect in the world. You either affect it to improve it, or you make it lesser, in the sense that you cause more pain, or you alleviate more pain in the future. And that's all there is.
There's either more neurons in a bad configuration or more neurons in a benign, not bad configuration. And that's all there is. There's either suffering being experienced or not suffering being experienced. Those are the choices we have. Those are the worlds we cause through making these decisions, these acts of applying logic and deciding on a cause of action. I'm saying it's really simple. Just prevent the harm and you've already done all the good you need to do. So once you make us immune to harm, you've made us euphoric. You've created all the good you need to create. Because you've gotten rid of the only source of it in the first place, which was the existence of the negative. Again, you can only have somewhere to go because of the negative. You have to be pushed under the quicksand for it to be good to get out of the quicksand. And that's it. There's no ground above. There's no sky above to go to.
That equation, you define something called ethics. But that's it. I made that clear in those thousands of videos.
So he says it has nothing to do with altruism. It's whether you're going to be a good robot or a shitty robot. Now, what does he mean by good or shitty? Good.
Your consequence, the effect on the condition of the jars. The jars have something in them. You will, through your life, affect what's in your jar and other jars. The simple equation is, are the other jars enduring torture, or more torture or less torture through your interaction? That's one of the equations. So your feelings matter, the other victim's feelings matter. And the simple math is, not that it's always simple, but the math is just evaluate the net consequence. What's the net consequence? When you add it all up, okay, was there more stuff in jars suffering or less? And that's all that matters.
Shitty in what sense? Well, clearly a moral sense, right? He's talking about moral...
So he does it again, right? So, it has nothing to do with any moral sense. It has to do with a definition of value. That's it. So I've clearly defined why I think sentience has value, where it's derived from, what it is, and part of that definition has to do with the fact that I am sentient, I'm conscious, I am doing the experiment right now by being conscious, and so I'm basing my judgment on the fact that I certainly know what torture is, and I know what pleasure is, and I know I wouldn't pay torture for pleasure.
Value. Morally good or morally bad. Okay, and what makes the robot good or shitty? Well, according to Mendham, it is whether it minimizes its blood footprint. Now, this is a metaphor.
There, he got it right. There, he got one thing. After all this bullshit, he finally got something right. That's exactly it. That's what the definition is. Good robots have less blood dripping off their parts. That's simple. Less pain and suffering.
What does blood footprint mean to Mendham? Well, it means the amount of suffering that you cause. Something like that. It's your hedonic footprint. So
he said hedonic in the context of the suffering you cause. So again, how dishonest does this asshole have to be? Is there anybody who can defend that? Is there anyone who can find anywhere in all the literature that's been written in the last 1,000 years where somebody talked about hedonic, okay, social engineering, hedonic, the welfare of others? Is there any context where that word was used to describe do-gooders? And there isn't any. So he'll recite a definition from a fucking dictionary and pretend he can play this semantics game when clearly every piece of evidence is just indicating he's playing a word game. He's just sitting there denying the real meaning of the word, denying what its context really is, and every case where it's ever been used. And he's pretending he can say it means this when it can't possibly mean this. The word's never been used to describe what I'm advocating. Ever. So why are you using it? They never talk about missionaries on doing hedonic work in the world. I mean, it's just idiotic.
World. Not just in yourself. So it's not about how you affect your own feelings. It's about how you affect the feelings of all sentient beings. That's what Mendham is talking about when he uses this metaphor of a blood footprint.
There, so you got it. So what's so complicated? So now counter-argue that theory. Are you going to do that somewhere? No.
And what does it mean to try to minimize your hedonic footprint with respect to all sentient beings?
So again, just get it. Again, the dishonesty of this person, I don't even know if the worst of my trolls would defend somebody using the word hedonic to describe actions in the world. I don't think anyone could defend that.
That's accurately described as altruism. A good robot is an altruistic robot that acts...
No, a good robot is one that does good. And good is going to be defined by understanding consequences and picking the right choice, making the choice that's the most efficient, that causes the least harm. That's what a good robot's going to do, is find the answer that fits the definition of good, which is less bad.
Not just to benefit itself, but to benefit others. Or maybe Mendham would say to minimize the harm to others. Again, it's the same thing whether you think of it in terms of benefits or costs, whatever. Okay, so good.
It's not the same thing, okay? So again, reckless nail and eye is not the same as cupcakes. So again, it's just idiotic to argue about them being the same thing when they're not the same thing, and I'm clearly arguing that one is derived out of the other. One exists first.
A robot is an altruistic robot that acts for the good, not just of itself, but for the good of others. And a shitty robot is a selfish robot that only acts to benefit itself. So
It's a stupid robot, yes. It's got a program that's really, really dumb.
just translate good as altruistic and shitty as selfish. Okay? It's that simple. The important implications of the theory.
So, and he says it's that simple, and where's your counter argument? Oh, that's right, you didn't have one. So he didn't explain how selfishness is good. He didn't explain how that ends up with a good result, when he knows, because it doesn't. It ends up with the bad result, where you have more jars with suffering in them. Fact. Now, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of people with good intentions who end up creating more suffering. We're not talking about intentions. So, we're just talking about the act itself. And the fact is, intentions don't have anything to do with it. But what we do know is that there's a probabilistic connection between trying to get the right answer and not trying to get the right answer. Trying will likely produce the better result. Measuring and then cutting will likely get a better result than just cutting.
Solution is that life is selfish and violent. This is very hard for most people to accept, that life is not...
Well, whatever that is, that's just much. I don't think it's that hard to accept. I don't think it's that hard to see. People see it, okay, but they've been brainwashed to think we're doing something that's just so incredibly interesting. Like, oh, we have such great dance moves that you just can't, of course you'll torture a few animals for it. We're just so cool. That's the part that makes no logical sense. I mean, if I did the play of, the humans sacrificing the animal to their god, I mean, most people nowadays would get it and say, that's pretty fucking gross. What the fuck are you people doing? Throwing virgins into the fucking volcano. I mean, if I did that play and showed, oh, look, this is really cool, isn't it? We're sacrificing things to God. What's the difference, right? You're just sacrificing all of the stuff that won't work out so you can walk out of your Vegas with your extra dollars and say, I'm a wiener, I'm a wiener. Same fucking thing.
All right, I said that life is selfish and violent, and people find that hard to accept. And Mendham felt the need to disagree with that, even though he said basically the same thing himself.
No, it's not. So I didn't say the same thing. I don't care. Your words are your words, okay? They're not my words. I can't object to you putting those words in my mouth. I can say to you clearly, that's not how I would describe the problem. The problem is that organisms are sentient, okay? And their actions can be dictated by knowledge or lack of knowledge. Those are the two things. So ignorance and vulnerability are the two words I would describe. So if I was to describe it, I would say it's precious commodities. How did I say it in the unintelligent design video? It's precious commodities in whatever the hands of unintelligent forces, and that's the problem. So again, your insistence that you are allowed to slander me with your language, okay, is rude, plainly.
Hundreds of times. Okay, he's always going on about how people ignore the brutality of nature. Like how vegans are concerned with factory farming, but they ignore the trillions of sentient organisms suffering in nature. So obviously, he doesn't think that everybody is a biological realist, but he wanted to argue with me. So instead of just agreeing, he went off on this weird random tangent.
Again, I'm not agreeing because it's not agreeable language. I'm allowed to say you're not allowed to call me a racist. Yeah, I'll say overtly to your face there's things about groups of people I don't like. But it has nothing to do with any feature of them except their behavior.
And then at the end, he just added a little bit more to the imaginary opponent. Saying I'm walking out of Vegas with extra dollars in my pocket, doing my little dance or whatever. Right? So you can see how his brain can't stay on track, right? It just keeps going back to these recurring themes.
Okay, so again, the track is clear. I'm arguing for the fact that life is just a mechanism, okay, and that it's an experiment. And you can analyze the important features, and you can see that an important feature is the sentience, and another important feature is our ability to be intelligent, to understand, and to organize the game, to create rules that are that would create things like desirable outcomes. And that's the two important features here. We have the intelligence to decide the game is just too expensive, and we should apply that intelligence.
It's like somebody lost in the wilderness keeps just circling around and around. It's not a little cartoon pony thing. It is creatures killing each other. All right, the second foundation is asymmetry. This is a claim about psychology, that life has more pain than pleasure. Then you have hedonism.
So he said it again. It's not Benatar's argument, and it's not my argument. So you totally failed to get that argument right.
It's not psychology. It's descriptive facts. The fact is that it's made out of the one thing. And you can imagine, like, oh yeah, my best pleasure. I can imagine it because I've had my best day. But I know I haven't had my worst day. And I know the worst day that's possible to happen to me can be just so, you can just keep saying, well, and then I had a broken arm. You can just add the headache to, the brain infection to fungus on your feet to, and then you can always break your fingers, and then you can always break your arm, and you can always break something else. You can always add to how deep the negative can go. But frankly, the positive doesn't have very far to go, right? I had a little 2-second thing, 27 seconds worth of some kind of bliss, and then I fell asleep. Oh yeah, that was a great day. Sorry, you can't go anywhere with the pleasure thing, because we already know how that works. You win the lottery today, and a week from now, you're going to be like, I really need another $1 million. And that's just how imbecile it is. I'm just saying. There's already been tons of satire, written by people like Monty Python and whatnot, just pointing out how fucking ludicrous our existence is. So I really shouldn't have to explain just how silly your optimism is that you're accomplishing something, douche.
All right, that was mostly disagreeing to agree.
Again, you're making these videos, making all these critiques, like somehow this isn't a logical argument, that the whole thing isn't a big monkeys fucking up football thing. It isn't a farce. And you're saying, I support the farce. So again, you're saying you support it. You support continuing it. Okay, why? Because you think it's trivial and unimportant. You don't think the pain and suffering is real. You don't think that having the cancer over and over and over and over again for millions of years is disgustingly bad. That's the simple truth. You're a trivialist.
He complained about the term psychology, saying that the asymmetry claim, as I defined it, is not a claim about psychology. Well, that's just stupid.
All right, well, I'll end there. But, again, so he's saying Benatar is stupid. And he's making the argument that somehow there isn't a clear asymmetry in the sense that what our pleasures are derived out of is first a need. And you can't have that. You don't have the need problem if you don't exist. So there is no liability. So it's a huge win. And there's well, again, I'm not going to remake the argument the way I would make it. It's the zero-sum game. The goods are made out of preventing bads, and it's just a fact. So anyway, till the next time and such. Oh, I can use buttons. So I will apply the appropriate button.